I'm gonna complain about Jordan Peterson instead. So if you haven't heard about Jordan Peterson, first of all, congratulations. I'd probably do a description to call him a mediocre university professor who has a Kermit the Frog voice and bad opinions, and seems to, despite saying he's not a Nazi, have tons and tons of these alt-right people idolizing him. He's like become the surrogate father to all of these very, very troubled young men on the internet.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that? Turn the friggin' frogs gay. Serious crap. Gay. Frogs, friggin' frogs. It's not funny.
Today we're going to be reviewing a video from a gay frog in which he explains to us why Dr. Jordan Peterson is wrong most of the time, how he is stoking up the hatred white men feel for other groups, and just in general why Dr. Jordan Peterson is a terrible person. Now, he has since deleted this video, and you will see why shortly, as he is a racist, he is a sexist, and a lot of his arguments boil down to, he's making money, I'm pissed off because I'm a racist and a sexist.
So Jordan Peterson first entered the news in September of 2016 when he bravely and profoundly said that he would never, ever refer to a trans student by the gender that they preferred unless the request was quote-unquote genuine. No one has asked him to do this yet, and he talks about some theoretical government crackdown on misgendering people, which doesn't exist.
I oppose discrimination against gender identity and gender expression. That's not the point. The point is the specifics of the legislation that surrounds it and the insistence that people will have to use compelled speech.
And he's either a complete moron or in fact a liar, as he states that there is no crackdown in Canada on speech in terms of pronouns whatsoever, even though Jordan Peterson has been on many news outlets. He's also gone into and spoken to the government about it. So are you a complete moron, bud, or are you just a liar? I'm gonna say you're a liar like most progressives.
The fact that so many of the alt-right have flocked to him as like this father figure shows that the alt-right people are like the Crabs and Goyles of the world. You know, in movies with a schoolyard bully, they're the people on the sidelines who just go, yeah.
He goes on to say Jordan Peterson is a leading figure amongst the alt-right, which he has not. He has spent a long time trying to convince people away from that particular ideology. And I'm going to play this interview clip that I found online. And he's posed this question which you're about to hear. And then you'll hear his response throughout this video once you've heard this frog-looking moron speak some more about how terrible Dr. Jordan Peterson is. As it's just night and day from the actual person.
You went on to say the lack of an identifiable and compelling path forward and the denialism these kids are being fed on a daily basis and undoubtedly destroying them, and that is especially true of the young men. This show we've covered widely the fact that suicide is the biggest killer of young men under the age of 45 in this country. It goes on in that interview to say, at this point, to my astonishment, Peterson begins to weep.
Yeah, well, it says, see, now it did it to me again.
He does this, by the way, by complaining about the fact that he can't hit women, and saying that feminists support the right of Muslims because they secretly want to be dominated by men. And so, as any self-help guru would do, he's written a book, a self-help book, something to be lapped up by his young, white, very male audience.
There are times when I'm all by myself and I concentrate as hard as I can to see if I can't make myself catch on fire like the Human Torch. And mark my words, newbie, if I ever pull it off, I will be back here to destroy this place.
His young, very male audience. Do you see the problem with your statement now, Mr. Racist? And I'm getting beyond sick and tired of people shitting all over white men in their own countries. The countries that have granted freedoms to non-white citizens that if I went to any of their countries, I would not receive in return. Okay, and you wonder why the alt-right is growing. You make a movie like Black Panther, in which people claim it's diverse, even though 90% black is not diverse, you idiots. But also they say, it's amazing, it's such an achievement for black people. And yet if you swapped the races, it would be the biggest scandal to ever come out of Hollywood. That's the issue I have with that's my main issue with social justice at the moment. You're creating races on the other side because you're attacking them every single day. You think it's a massive problem that he has an audience filled with white men. Is what, some Chinese pop star? Is it an issue if they have mainly Chinese fans? no, you're a fucking racist.
But really, if you just distill his philosophy, it's really just Ayn Randism. It's objectivism. It's the whole selfishness is good philosophy. And of course, because every single tiny bit of trying to make society a little more polite to those marginalized is, to his mind, a slippery slope to gulags and communist Soviet takeovers of everything.
Mate, James Damore was just told that his innocuous scientific memo, which was stating the differences between the sexes, was offensive and could create a hostile working environment. It's just utterly ridiculous. How these marginalized groups, as you state, I do not think that the women and people of color are marginalized. But is it the affirmative action? Is it the fact that they never can receive any criticism whatsoever, or that is racist? There was one bad review from the critics of Black Panther, and he was just reamed out as just a massive racist. Do you want to know what his criticism was? It was that there wasn't enough action scenes. God, why do critics even have a job anymore? They're so insanely useless.
Look, last night, you know, I was at this talk I gave, and about 1,000 people came, and about 500 of them stayed afterwards, and most of them were young men, you know, and just one of them after the other comes up to me, and they shake my hand, and they say, look, I've been listening to what you've been saying for 6 months, and it's changed my life. It's like I was depressed, I was addicted to drugs, my relationships weren't working out, I was hopeless, I didn't have any goal. I started cleaning up my room and telling the truth and working hard on myself, and it's really working, and I just want to thank you for helping me. And I think, God, it's so sad.
It's a system of thinking that makes privileged people feel entirely comfortable and safe in their privilege, and completely ignores the structures that keep marginalized people marginalized. It's basically the Ayn Rand thing. It's blaming people who are marginalized for their marginalization, and also, at the same time, saying that they're coming for you. And that's what the evil social justice warriors are doing.
Listen, Supergirl. I'm gonna break you down into so many little pieces that my grandmother, who can do a 1,000-piece puzzle of clear blue sky in less than an hour, will never be able to finish putting you back together again, even if she does go back in time to when her vision was perfect.
As the typical progressive, he just throws out buzzwords without backing them up with any cases whatsoever. I can refute you, mate, by saying that those colored people and those women, they receive affirmative action. For example, that's literally just one. And yet you can't bring up a single one, yet you're claiming Dr. Jordan Peterson is wrong. Oh, yeah, sorry. The progressives are just looking for a politer society for those colored people, right? At the expense of just the sanity of the current white people living in those countries. That's fantastic.
But like, his ideas for how to live a good life are really simple and really moronic. You know, great social causes weren't succeeded because people decided to make their rooms and live a quote-unquote focused life. So Jordan Peterson has this, I wouldn't say conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy theory, that says that there's this neo-Marxist, postmodern movement that wants to undermine Western civilization in order to put in communism because it couldn't stand up in the regular society when it tried the first time.
I'm gonna say it real slow for you. Gay frogs! Won't you fight for your life?
100 million deaths, untold suffering, communism is completely awful. There are a lot of people that are trying to implement that in Western societies. But hey, you're calling it a conspiracy theory, so please, debunk it. Debunk something. Bring up a point. Stop just saying he believes this and then just bang, moving on to another point. You're such a freaking muppet, mate. You look like Monday Matt fused with a hobgoblin.
Like they're freaking Skeletor or something. Don't worry, somehow despite being the exact same idea, this is somehow distinct from the Nazi conspiracy theory of cultural Marxism. This is a conspiracy theory that argues that an international cabal of cultural Marxists are trying to undermine Western civilization with their Marxism.
Yeah, the card is incredibly lame, and if you're actually gonna do a lame little card, can you at least do it properly? Maybe print it out so it doesn't make you look like you couldn't pass freaking kindergarten?
Now, I'm not going to say that Jordan Peterson is a Nazi. He does have a lot of Nazi friends, but he's not a Nazi. You'll never hear him say something like, we need to secure a future for white children. What he does do is say that, well, he admits that there's a connection between empowering women and economic growth, that we have to be cognizant of these things because, quote unquote, the birth rate is dropping.
Which is in fact a massive issue at the moment, because then you get governments that see this, and instead of trying to just promote having children, they just start importing massive amounts of people from the third world. So yes, it is actually an issue that you would have to discuss. If there's more women in the workforce, there's obviously going to be less women that are just stay-at-home mums, they might not have as much time to have as many kids, etc. You can't actually discuss a topic without just being deemed a sexist. But I'm guessing you can't sort of conceive of any of this. Why don't you just show us that lame freaking card again?
That so many of these men, you know, they've not had an encouraging bloody word, a real encouraging word in their entire life. It just takes a little bit of encouragement and care so that they're willing to set themselves straight to some degree and start trying. It's just a catastrophe that's so rare in their lives.
He doesn't seem to want to call for like an open white ethno-state, but he retweeted a tweet by the Daily Caller with headlines that said things like, American city torn apart by black rioters. And as the most famous YouTube rational on earth, he's also done 2.5-hour long YouTube videos complaining about things like identity politics. Oh, and he doesn't believe in white privilege. Surprise, surprise.
Gay frogs, friggin' frogs. I don't like a frog. Gay friggin' frogs. Frogs.
Ah yes, the privilege to be discriminated against your own country that your ancestors built at the expense of people that are just coming in from other countries that, you know, we were at war with, say, 50 years ago, and then, after granting them the freedoms and the rights that if I went to their countries I would not receive, to then be called a racist in your own countries, where if you tried to implement this same thing in any of their countries, you would be probably chucked in jail or laughed at. Yeah, it's such a privilege, isn't it? You ideologue. There is no such thing as white privilege. Seriously, you say white privilege, I hear Jesus, okay? Oh, he doesn't believe in Jesus, he must be a heretic.
Somehow, being polite to trans people by using their preferred pronouns is inevitably going to lead to collective farms and, like, gulags. And there's a lot of signs that he's kind of a con artist. He does things like, he has a Patreon where he does long diatribes about how much he hates, you know, political correctness or whatever. But then he also does like one-on-one counseling sessions for like $30 US an hour.
Wow, a clinical psychologist using his expertise to help out people for a fee, and $30 is cheap. He could charge a lot more and people would still pay for it. So what's your issue with that? And I don't agree that the progressives are just trying to help trans people by making society slightly better. They're just trying to control people.
I never thought to do that. I think it's really great that the Maclean's article about him pretty aptly described him as the stupid person, smart person. His channel is full of these extremely long, extremely dull streams where he just rants incoherently.
Friggin' frog crap. Won't you fight the frogs? It's not funny. I'm gonna say it real slow for you.
You can probably start to see why this guy deleted his video. Jordan Peterson doesn't just ramble incoherently, but it might seem incoherent to you because you're the type of person that believes in white privilege, and thus I think that tells you a lot about your character, plus just what everyone else is seeing right now. Can you actually be honest for the remaining part of your video, or is that too much for a social justice warrior like yourself?
And if there's one thing that if you don't know about how arguments on the internet work, there's kind of a might makes right thing going on. Trust me, the YouTube rationals, the people who are, you know, blithely and intelligently cutting apart a person's argument, typically do so by throwing their hundreds and thousands of fans to harass the person out of existence.
I see, you're taking the Steve Shives, Christy Winters line of logic, where if a person reviews your video and the audience sees that your argument is awful and you're probably a terrible person, that it's the person reviewing the video's fault for actually doing it in the first place, instead of yourself for holding awful opinions, just generally being a despicable person. Now, I have no control over my audience. I don't want anyone to come and leave comments on your video, but I can see why. Because you're saying Dr. Jordan Peterson's this awful person, while also claiming that white privilege exists and that the social justice warriors didn't do nothing. Yeah, it's definitely not your stances on issues whatsoever.
And here's the thing about Jordan Peterson. This is why it's so infuriating for people who have any sort of academic background to talk about him. First of all, look in the comments. There's going to be a legion of people saying that I didn't address any of his points. Actually, you hear that quite a bit.
So instead of taking that criticism on board, you in fact just completely ignore it and do the exact same thing that everyone is criticizing Jordan Peterson's detractors of. You haven't debunked a single one of his points. Are you going to start doing it now? You've left it a bit late, but that's okay, I'm still here.
And I think the reason why no one does, and the reason why I guess I'm not either, Jordan Peterson has mastered the art of sounding like he's saying something thoughtful, but if you think about any of his statements for more than about 15 seconds, it doesn't make sense. You know,
that is probably the dumbest thing you have said today, mate. If it's so ludicrous, if you can, after 15 seconds, realize that it makes no sense whatsoever, just pick one of his arguments, put it in your video, and debunk it. But instead, oh no, you're like, oh, it makes no sense, it's ludicrous, I'm not gonna tackle any of his points whatsoever. I'm just gonna look like Monday Matt, fused with a bridge troll, and don't ever clean my camera for some reason, as those smudges are really starting to piss me off. Clean your freaking camera, bud.
You think he's being so intelligent, but then you realize he just woke up at 8 AM and started Googling... and started... You think he's...
You must be full of baloney. A lot of it.
Right, fat joke. Always fun. Only people you can still make fun of.
And Christians. Oh, and black.
You think he's like this super intellectual, and then at like 8 in the morning, he's going to complain about how the Google results and the Bing results for bikinis are different.
Oh, you mean when you type in American inventors into Google, it comes up with mostly black people? Yeah, but no, it's just... I haven't actually heard Jordan Peterson complain about that, but yes, Google, please stop being so ideologically driven. No one is going to believe that black people mostly invented everything in America. It's just never going to happen. I'm sorry, they just haven't done that.
His stuff might just sound like stupid self-help stuff, but there's something super damaging about his message that certain people, most of them women and minorities...
No, it seemed to be like the white, progressive social justice warrior that is using the women and the colored people as tools to gain control. And please, please stop bringing out that ridiculously lame card. Do you think it's witty? Do you think it's funny? I don't understand why he keeps doing that. Does this guy not have enough brain power that he can find or just do a little template in Photoshop and print it out? He has to look like a retarded 4-year-old?
Are not only trying to destroy your freedom by asking you to be a little bit more polite and considerate, but that they're trying to completely undermine Western civilization.
We could spend all day arguing right or wrong. Give me the $100. We didn't bet. We could spend all day arguing whether we bet or not. Give me the $100.
They are trying to undermine Western civilization, mate, as they believe in the privilege pyramid. They believe white people are inherently racist, scum. They want to discriminate based on race and sex, that which fundamentally goes against what the West stands for. I know this has been a long video. I'm going to wrap it up soon, as I'm getting to the point where I'm just going to start insulting this disingenuous, lying, troll-looking person. As he even admits he's not going to debunk any of the arguments, so this is just a pure slander piece.
So when somebody is saying that racism is still a problem, he's saying that they're part of an evil conspiracy that wants to destroy everything. Even though he says he's against violence, when you're using such violent rhetoric...
Really, he's speaking words, and that is violent rhetoric. You disingenuous freaking...
You're egging on real violence, and it's really troubling because there's a lot of real problems with violence going on right now because the radical right is doing tons and tons of violent atrocities against women and minorities.
We didn't need those. So, all done?
Mate, it's the far left. The far left have Black Lives Matter, Antifa, that are trying to shut down people just purely for having a different thought process than them. Black Lives Matter kills cops, you know, pigs in blankets, fry them like bacon. Have you heard of that expression? I'm so sick of everyone being like, oh, the far right, they're the ones causing all the atrocities. No, they're not. Okay? They actually don't really have any sort of power whatsoever at the moment. So, the far right is basically nothing. If the far left would go to another freaking planet, then we would have absolutely no problem with the far right. The far left, in my opinion, are one of the most disgusting set of people currently on the planet. Because they are just causing unnecessary suffering for people and just ruining countries. It's just not fair.
All across the world, you just saw one in Italy recently, but because they aren't brown and aren't Muslim, nobody's talking about them in the context of terrorism, which, you know, is a kind of thing that a postmodernist would point out and that Jordan Peterson would say doesn't exist.
Except the MSM always cover far-right attacks, as they put him, which is basically anyone, I would say, right of Stalin at this point. And they basically ignore, not just Muslim terrorist attacks, the grooming gangs, the segregation, Sharia courts. I could go on and on and on. Muslims basically get a free pass in the West, even though they believe in an ideology that is probably the most disgusting ideology on the planet. From a child-raping, mass-murdering, perfect person. Okay, mate? I really wish the media would start covering it slightly more and stop flipping out about the far right, which is still basically non-existent.
I do want to point out, though, that there are some ways on how do you engage with a Jordan Peterson. This guy thrives on attention. He thrives on controversy. And I suppose I'm feeding into that with this video, so I apologize on that front.
How does he thrive on controversy? Please stop backing up these claims with one example. You do realize that I've heard him in many interviews lately. He's constantly worried about slipping up, making a mistake. I think it's more he's just been put into this position and there's no one else really. I'm guessing if there was like 10 other Jordan Petersons that he could be like, look, help me out, he would love that. And it's not controversies, it's the left trying to destroy a man. He beats them, and that's apparently a controversy.
But for example, when he tried to do part of his book tour in Edmonton, there was a group of trans activists who decided to do something a little different than just protest his event and then walk away. His arguments are ridiculous. There's no point in actually debating him.
No, mate, if they're so ridiculous, then you should be able to debunk them incredibly easy. That is such a pathetic line of logic. And I've seen other people that aren't just social justice warriors use it as well. Oh, their arguments are ridiculous. Oh, what's the point in debating them? If their argument is ridiculous, they most likely do have followers of some kind. Your job is to convince them away from that ideology. If it's so ridiculously easy, you should be jumping at the chance to do it. So it's just a bitch cop-out from the soy boy king.
That just gives him more attention and gives him legitimacy when he has none. So the group decided to just throw a party to show how great and resilient the LGBTQ community in Edmonton is. You know, for a group that's not being systematically oppressed, they have to celebrate things like surviving.
Seriously, they have to survive, apparently. Apparently, there are Muslim death squads running around threatening to throw them off buildings in the West. Ah, it must be so easy to be you, mate. It must be you, because you obviously don't self-reflect whatsoever. I can't believe you actually uttered that statement just now. Yeah, they just have to struggle with surviving.
Hey, maybe they're even making their beds and living a quote-unquote focused life, just like the lobster. Hopefully I'm getting on this iron while it's hot, because I do think that his 15 minutes of fame are almost up. And I think that he's a really good case study for a lot of you to look at the dangers of hate rhetoric.
Hate rhetoric is bullshit. I feel incredibly sorry for your audience that they actually believe anything that is coming out of your mouth. You haven't shown what Dr. Jordan Peterson says is hate rhetoric, as you haven't shown any of the other claims that you have made. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, his argument is just so ridiculous that it's beneath your level, Mr. Bridge Troll, to debunk. How about you help out your audience? Because that's what you're supposed to be doing on YouTube, you stupid muppet.
And how it espouses itself despite swearing up and down that it's not hate rhetoric. And also, if you're going to resist that kind of movement, debating and protesting isn't as good as building communities of resistance and empowerment for yourself.
Translation, meaningless buzzwords that allow me to just not respond to any one of his points whatsoever and still feel like I'm right.
To hear the idea that their lives actually matter, that if they straighten themselves up and fly right, that they'll have a beneficial effect on themselves and their family and the community, and that the world is starving for that. And for them as individuals, not for them as a group, but for each of them as individuals. So, yeah, it breaks me up. Every time the topic comes up, it breaks me up because it's so damn sad. And we're so stupid. We're alienating young men. We're telling them that they're patriarchal oppressors and denizens of rape culture and you know, tyrants in waiting, and we fail to discriminate between their competence and their tyranny. And it's awful. It's so destructive.
Anyway, thank you for watching up until this point. I hope you can see why he deleted this video and the backlash that you did receive, mate. It was definitely warranted, as this is a Steve Shives level of video. And I've been setting up OBS over the last couple of days, so the next time I live stream, you'll see the changes. I'm just trying to figure out how to get Hangouts to work through it so I can have people actually, you know, call in, or I can have guests. So look forward to that. If you ever want to speak to me, I'm on my Discord, so the link's in the description below, or Twitter or Facebook. You know, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.